for the Torah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's call. My name is Liz Bloom, the Director for Equality and Opportunity at the White House Domestic Policy Council. I am proud to work on the Biden-Harris administration's efforts to counter anti-Semitism. And I'm honored to be with you all today. Shana Tova. We're grateful to the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the Rabbinical Assembly, the Rabbinical Council of America, and the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Assembly for co-sponsoring this call to mark the high holidays. And special thanks to the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism for coordinating today's conversation. This high holiday call has been a joyous tradition over several administrations. We know, however, that this year is far from normal as the Jewish community continues to reel from the events of October 7th, the sting of rising anti-Semitism over the past year, and the pain, suffering, and uncertainty brought about by the war. So we are especially grateful that you've taken the time to join us this year. In the spirit of the high holidays, we value this opportunity to discuss our shared priorities and reflections with you all. You'll hear directly from President Biden and also from Neera Tanden, the chair of the Domestic Policy Council, Brett McGurk, White House coordinator for the Middle East and North Africa, and Jen Klein, director of the White House Gender Policy Council. I'd like to turn the call over now to Rabbi Jonah Pesner, the director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, to introduce President Biden. Rabbi Pesner, please go ahead.
Thank you, Liz. Mr. President, Shana Tova, or as we've been saying here in Israel, where I'm calling in from, Shana Yoter Tova. May this be a better year. I'm here in Israel in solidarity with the commemoration of the October 7th attacks, meeting and praying with the families of victims, hostages, and of course, an entire country under daily missile attacks. During these high holy days, Mr. President, we consider the year that is ending and prepare our souls for the year to come. So let me reflect on the past year. In the wake of October 7th, Mr. President, you affirmed your lifetime commitment as a true Zionist. Within days, you traveled to Israel. By the end of November, you helped arrange the return of 100 hostages. When Iran launched missiles at Israel in April, you organized an international effort to protect Israel from assault. You again helped repel Iran's most recent terrible assault on Israel just last week. You have met repeatedly with the families of the hostages still being held by Hamas. At home, your national strategy to counter anti-Semitism has been an invaluable effort in the face of record rates of hate against our community. As we say in our tradition, if all of this was so, Dayenu, it would have been enough. But in recognition that this is our last high holiday call with you as president, let me express the thanks of the American Jewish community for your lifetime of public service and your allyship to our community. As a senator, your deep and meaningful ties to the Delaware Jewish community extend through the decades. Your leadership on the Foreign Relations Committee strengthened Jewish communities around the world. And your recognition that the heinous white supremacists in Charlottesville chanting, "Jews will not replace us," inspired you to run for president, which reflects your unwavering commitment to our community's well-being and to the values of civil rights, pluralism, and democracy that undergird our nation. Mr. President, for all of this and so much more, we thank you. And as we say in our tradition, may you continue to go from strength to strength.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi, for that introduction. Before I begin, I want to say we're prepared for another hurricane hitting Florida, and that's what I've been doing and why I had to push back this several times, and I apologize. I directed my team to do everything we can to save lives and help communities before, during, and after the hurricane, the one that is just passed and this awful one that's about to hit. My most important message today is for those who are in impacted areas, please listen to your local authorities. Follow all safety instructions and evacuation orders. This is serious, very serious. Now to the events today. You know, as my friends, the rabbis in Delaware who I've become friends with over the years and been engaged with, can tell you, I was one of those lucky Christians who was raised by a Christian who was he understood what was going on. My dad was what you call a righteous Christian. My dad literally raised us to believe that we had to stand up for any community being persecuted. And he used to rage at dinner about why we didn't bomb the railroad tracks in Auschwitz, why we didn't. This is the God's truth. The rabbis at home can tell you. And he used to talk about how we wouldn't let that one ship land and with Jewish refugees on it at the time during Hitler's era. And he talked about how it's important for people to know what happened and not forget. And one of the things that it taught me was that every one of my children and grandchildren, when they turned the age of 14, I put them on a plane. I flew them to Dachau. I wanted them to see that no one could pretend it wasn't happening. You walk through the gate, and you'll be liberated. Well, you see those beautiful homes along the outside of that gate, and you know they had to know. They had to know what was going on, and I wanted them to understand. I wanted them to see where the ovens were. I wanted them to know what was going on, and because I wanted them to be aware. And I think one of the things that I'm about to talk about is, the country has been sort of, I don't know how we could say it, has not paid nearly much attention to the history of brought us about. When I went over shortly after the second smaller Holocaust, but even more vividly seen by the whole world on the 7th, it was because I wanted to let the world know where I stood and where America stood. And I saw the remnants of what had happened 10 days earlier. I saw, and anyway, you all know, you understand it. Now this event today, I want to thank you for joining this call, and I apologize for having to reschedule it. In my direction last week, the United States military took unprecedented action again to actively assist the successful defense of Israel. You've heard me say before that I got very badly criticized as a young senator saying I'm a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. That's not necessary. And the idea, I firmly believe, without an Israel, every Jew in the world's security is less stable. I mean that. Doesn't mean that Jewish leadership doesn't have to be more progressive than it is, but it does mean it has to exist. And that's what worries me most about what's going on now. You heard me say before that my commitment to the safety of Jewish people and the security of Israel is the right to exist is independent of everything else. The Jewish state has to remain the ironclad commitment to it. For the last 3 years, it's been the honor to do this high holiday with all of you from the White House. In a season of joy and a season of pain, and that's what we've been going through, a season of joy and pain. You are the rock for your people. I want to thank you for all you do every single day for your congregations, for your communities, for our country. I know this year's call is very different and is a very difficult time for the Jewish community and for Jews around the world. In the midst of the high holidays, 2 days ago, we commemorated the first anniversary of October 7th, the deadliest day for Jewish people since the Holocaust. And a year later, the trauma and the loss from that day and its aftermath is still raw. Hard to memorialize and mourn the tragedy that's still ongoing. Hostages still in captivity, some American Jews as well. Loved ones still in harm's way, survivors carrying wounds, seen and unseen, that never go away. The families and friends left behind will never be the same. I just spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu for about an hour this morning and offered my condolences on this somber one-year anniversary. Throughout this year, my wife Jill and I, and Kamala and Doug, have mourned along with all of you. including after the appalling execution of the 6 hostages, including America's own First Goldberg, Poland, a 24-year-old last week, who would have turned 24 last week. My administration is doubling down on our work to secure and release the remaining hostages, just as we have freed hostages already, and we will not rest until they're all home. As you saw just last week, the United States fully supports Israel's right to defend itself against Iran and all its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. We're doing everything we can to ease the suffering of all the people from this war against Hamas and that Hamas started. As Israel's ambassador to Washington said at the memorial 2 days ago, quote, "We remember the Jewish commandment that we are all created in the image of God, and the loss of innocent life, Israeli, Palestinian, Lebanese, or others, is a tragedy. Well, I feel the same way. Far too many civilians have suffered far too much during this year's conflict. I also want you to know that I see you, I hear you, I see your pain from the ferocious surge of anti-Semitism in America and, quite frankly, around the world. Absolutely despicable. And I hope we learned a lesson from our parents' generation. We have to stand up. We have to call it out. It has to be stopped. In America, we respect and protect the fundamental right of free speech to protest peacefully. But there is no place, emphasize no place, anywhere in America, none, for anti-Semitism, hate speech, or threats of violence of any kind against the Jews or anyone else. Long before October the 7th, long before I launched the first national security to counter anti-Semitism in American history, first time in American history, Vice President Harris and I and our entire administration are aggressively implementing that commitment. Since we took office, we secured a record of over $800 million for the physical security of nonprofits, including synagogues, Jewish community centers, Jewish day schools all around the country. Since October 7, 2023, we've secured an additional $400 million, the largest single increase ever in funding, ever. And we have concrete evidence that our historic assistance is making an impact, and the investment matters. The Department of Education has put our colleges on notice about something that should be obvious to everyone, that anti-Semitism is discrimination. Say it again, anti-Semitism is discrimination and prohibited under Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And the Department of Homeland Security has provided resources to train campus law enforcement administrators on how to ensure Jewish students are safe on campus. And we're going to keep working to ensure that Jewish students can get their education free of intimidation and harassment. The Department of Justice is also moving swiftly to investigate and prosecute anti-Semitic hate crimes and hold the perpetrators accountable. We encourage you, the members of your community, to please report incidents to the local law enforcement. My administration is calling on the social media companies to adopt a zero-tolerance policy toward anti-Semitism and other hateful content, including the vile anti-Semitic attacks online that we've seen in recent days against public officials leading responses and recovery efforts to Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. You know, it's appalling, but it must end now. We have to speak and end it now. Globally, our nation's first ambassador-level special envoy and to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, Deborah Lipstadt. And Deborah has mobilized more than 40 countries and international organizations to support our new guidelines for countering anti-Semitism around the world. And this matters. But I know there's so much more to do. And let me assure you, as your president, that you are not alone. You belong. Always, always have, always will be, and always must be protected. From the inception of our nation, Jewish Americans have enriched every part of American life. Let me say that again. From our very inception as a nation, Jewish Americans have enriched every part of American life, and they're going to continue to do so for many years to come. Let me close with this. Think about the wisdom I've learned from Jewish communities in Delaware and across the country. that I've gotten to know over the years. Seems to me there is a delicate yet profound balance between joy and pain to the high holidays. Rosh Hashanah is a day of celebration for the Jewish New Year. It's also a day of judgment. Similarly, Yom Kippur is the most solemn day in the Jewish calendar. Yet Jewish scholars say it's also the happiest day because it's time for forgiveness and for renewal. And in 2 weeks, you celebrate another holiday with the singing and dancing for the Torah. You know, I know you'll do so with profound sorrow in your soul because last year that holiday was shattered by October the 7th. From my perspective, Jewish people have embodied this duality of pain and joy for generations. It's your strength. The Jewish people have always chosen to find joy, happiness, and light, despite centuries of suffering, persecution, and pain. That's the ending of this is an enduring lesson and legacy for the Jewish people and for all America to understand. So thank you for continuing to find joy in the darkness and shine your light on the nation and on the world. God bless you all, and may you have a happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your deeply moving words. We know how busy you are, so we'll give you a moment to drop off the call. Then we'll proceed to the Q&A portion of today's discussion. We are now joined by Domestic Policy Advisor Neera Tandon, who will answer the first two questions. Rabbi Renee Bauer, President of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association, will ask the first question. Rabbi Bauer, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me and having this call despite everything going on. This country's core commitment to democracy has been a pillar of strength and a blessing that has allowed American Jews to thrive in ways we have not known in any other time or place. For us, democracy means freedom, peace, and safety. Can you let us know how we can help ensure its principles continue to be renewed for future generations? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bauer. And I think wrapped in your question is both what we do about democracy itself, sort of specific actions we can take, but also the broader principles behind democracy and what they mean for protections for racial, religious minorities. And fundamental to our vision of democracy is the concept of a multiracial democracy, a multi-religious democracy, a multi-ethnic democracy that protects all people and really is illustrated by when the president says that he wants to ensure this country is for all of us, not just some of us. So I will take this in two parts. Of course, there's actions specifically around preservation of democracy that has been the central cause of this administration. The president signed the Electoral Count Reform Act into law to help ensure the will of the people is respected. The president and vice president have required members of their administration to take the strictest ever ethics pledge. And of course, we are focused on protecting the right to vote. The president issued an executive order to ensure that we as an administration are using every lever at our disposal to ensure that people have the right to vote, to expand access to the right to vote. And of course, the president and the vice president have been fighting for the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. But I also just want to raise at a higher level that we know that so much of what is at stake in this moment is not just the specific legislation or action, but really the kind of country that we are. And what we see in the rise in antisemitism, or that has been deeply linked to racist attacks on refugees in Ohio, our experience and the tragedy in 2018, where attacks on Jewish people were linked to support for migrants in a caravan through, conspiracy mongering. We know that anti-Semitism has been steeped in racism and other forms of discrimination. And so our commitment to fighting for the rights of all people, for the rights of religious minorities, for the rights of all people in this country is, in our view, fundamental to democracy itself. That our republic rests on constitutional rights for religious, ethnic, racial minorities, and that strengthens our democracy and does not weaken it. So we must all remain vigilant in defense of democracy itself, but we also believe that that means remaining vigilant against attacks on any group, any minority group, because that does weaken the social fabric of our country and fundamentally weaken our democracy as well. I do just also want to end by saying how grateful we are for the leadership of everyone on this call, on the work you have done over decades to strengthen our democracy, to ensure everyone has a voice, and that our country really is, as I said, for all of us.
Thank you, Rabbi Bauer, for that question. Now I will turn it over to Rabbi Erica Ash, President of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, for the second question. Rabbi Ash, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Recently, the FBI released data showing that 15% of all hate crimes last year were directed against Jews. That's staggering, especially since Jews are less than 2.5% of the population. We deeply appreciate your efforts to combat anti-Semitism, including through the National Strategy to Counteract Anti-Semitism, which intentionally took a whole of government, whole of society approach. Why is it important to the administration to make this an issue for the country at large and not just the Jewish community?
Thank you so much, Rabbi Ash, for that question. And I just want to let me just reiterate what the president just said. Anti-Semitism has no place in America, period. That has been his North Star for our work on countering anti-Semitism. And just to answer your question directly, we believe that attacks on the Jewish community weaken us as a country. And that is why we issued the National Strategy to Counter Anti-Semitism, as the president said, well before October 7th, because we see the attacks on the Jewish community as part and parcel of a rise in hate in our country. And that is why we have been particularly focused over the last year to ensure that we are fighting anti-Semitism wherever it is. The national strategy has actually developed particular tools that we were able to use over the last year, an interagency process where we can very quickly deploy resources. So we are proud of the fact that the Department of Justice has taken specific actions to prosecute cases, that the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights has opened more than 150 investigations, a series of investigations for actions post October 7th. We are hopeful to have more resources for the Department of Education, but they are aggressively prosecuting cases, investigating cases. And I also want to just specifically call out a toolkit that the Department of Education issued. We brought together college campuses to roll out this particular guidance that went out over the summer that went into how we can have safe campuses. And part of that toolkit described time, place, and manner guidelines for protests to make sure that they're safe, but also that those protests ensure everyone is safe. And we do think that those are having an impact on college campuses. We're proud to convene the 400 leaders from college campuses to discuss those federal resources. We have been trying to ensure that college campuses, local communities, and people everywhere know that federal resources, whether it's the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, or the Department of Education, are available and really ready to assist to fight the scourge of anti-Semitism that we see, because we know that unless we are vocal and we are quick and we are determined, unfortunately, messages get spread that this is more acceptable, and that is unacceptable to us. So we welcome your partnership. We've been really appreciative of hearing from you as leaders of what you're seeing on the ground so that we can deploy resources wherever and whenever they're needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Nira and Rabbi Ash. Next, we are joined by Rabbi Tzvi Engel, President of the Rabbinical Council of America. Answering his question is Brett McGurk, White House Coordinator for the Middle East and North Africa. Rabbi Engel, please ask your question.
Thank you, Ms. Bloom. Mr. McGurk, Hirsch Goldberg Poland's grandmother is a member of my congregation. Please thank President Biden for his words following Hirsch's murder a few weeks ago. He brought us all great comfort. As we just marked the first anniversary of Hamas's attack 2 days ago, and the first anniversary of the ongoing indiscriminate rocket fire by Hezbollah on Israel's north yesterday, Israel continues to wage an existential war on multiple fronts, with 101 men, women, and children still held hostage, and over 60,000 people displaced from their homes for a year. Hours ago, 2 people were killed by Hezbollah rocket fire. Under the president's leadership, the United States continues to play a major role by standing with America's greatest ally in the Middle East. But some, at home and abroad, seek to weaken those ties. What concrete steps can the administration take to further clarify this overall commitment to the broader American public and the world?
Rabbi Engel, thank you so much for your thoughtful question, and also for the comments on Hirsch, and that Hirsch's grandmother is a member of your congregation. I have to say, we all got to know Hirsch's family incredibly well, and Rachel and John in particular, and all the hostage families. I just spoke with them, in fact, again over the weekend, and we are determined to bring the hostages out of Gaza. And the massacre, I think the president mentioned the massacre of the hostages in a tunnel under Rafah a month or so ago, was one of a gut punch to all of us, because I have to say we were in the midst of negotiating overseas through mediators and with a list of hostages and a list of prisoners, and Hamas was not fully engaging in that process. And then within days, 6 of the hostages, 3 of whom were on that list to be released in the first phase of a hostage deal, were massacred in a tunnel. And the more we've learned about what happened there, the more unspeakable it is. And it speaks, I think, to your question, because one thing I think we constantly have to remind ourselves and also remind others is how this started. And this started on October 7th by Hamas, and a decision of Yahya Sinwar and the leadership of Hamas to effectively invade Israel with almost 3,000 to 4,000 very well-trained Hamas fighters and military formations. It was an invasion. Taking hostages, massacring over 1,000 people, and then returning to Gaza to live, fight, and try to survive underground to what we now know is a far more extensive network of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers and multiple stories of tunnels built underneath Gaza. The world has just never seen anything like it, and that's what started this. And Yahya Sinwar remains the decision maker. He remains, we believe, alive and in a tunnel underneath Gaza, holding hostages, and likely with hostages in his vicinity. So I think we have to remind ourselves of that all the time, because this could end tomorrow in Gaza if Hamas would release hostages. And that is a decision in Sinwar's hands, and the deal that has been worked out brings massive relief, not only, of course, for the hostage families who deserve it immediately, but for Gazans. What is in the deal is significant, massive amounts of humanitarian assistance, of restoring rubble, of clearing rubble, restoring medical infrastructure, bakeries, everything else. It's all in the deal. and it's one man right now, Sinwar, that is standing in the way. Similarly, you mentioned Hezbollah. Hezbollah started on October 8th, made the fateful decision, Nasrallah did, to begin firing rockets and missiles into Israel, over 10,000 of them now, and displacing 70,000 Israelis from their homes. And even 2 weeks before his death, declared that he would not stop until there was a ceasefire in Gaza. And of course, there could not be a ceasefire in Gaza without the hostages, and Sinwar standing in the way of that. So that is what not only makes this so complex, but also I think is very clarifying. I have to say, you have heard from the president, this entire crisis in every dimension has our full and complete focus and attention literally 24/7 a day. We are constantly engaged directly with the Israelis, with partners throughout the region, with the Palestinian side, with the Lebanese, Egyptians, everybody on this effort. And when it comes to the defense of Israel, the call with the president and the prime minister just this morning, obviously very focused on the attack by Iran about a week or so ago on October 1st, nearly 200 ballistic missiles, many of which we shot out of the sky in outer space. And we will do that again. We are committed to the defense of Israel. We're also committed to holding Iran fully accountable for that attack. And we will continue to do so. The military resources we have deployed to the region since October 7th, on a dynamic basis, things come in and out, but we make sure that we have a very strong deterrent posture because we know that Iran is behind this network of terror that is very focused not only on U.S. personnel, but particularly on Israel. So I can assure you, as you heard directly from the president and the vice president as well, who was on the call this morning, this has our full, complete attention. We will not waver. And our commitment to the defense of Israel, as the president said when we went to Israel in the summer of 2022, and again, shortly after the attacks of October 7th, the first president to visit Israel in time of war, it is ironclad. And that is a true statement. And I think you'll actually see that play out here over the coming weeks. Thank you so much for your question and for participating in the call.
Thank you, Rabbi Engel and Brett. Finally, I'd like to invite Rabbi Jay Kornsgold, President of the Rabbinical Assembly, to ask a question of Jen Klein, Director of the Gender Policy Council. Rabbi Kornsgold, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been more than 2 years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. States across the country have banned or severely restricted abortion access. Many rabbis and cantors are among those challenging these restrictions, including on religious freedom grounds. How is the administration focusing on the importance of reproductive rights to people of all faiths and no faith?
Thank you so much for that question, Rabbi Kornsgold. My work to advance the rights of women and girls, both at home and around the world, is rooted deeply in my Jewish faith. I'm really proud to serve under the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Harris, who are fighting to restore reproductive freedom after, as you noted, the Supreme Court overturned a fundamental right that women in America had for nearly 50 years. And this is not only an issue of women's rights, it's of course also an issue of religious freedom. As you all know better than I do, under Jewish law, the well-being of the mother is paramount. So if the continuation of a pregnancy might imperil the life or the health of the mother, abortion is not only permitted, it's required. And many Jewish authorities not only allow, but celebrate IVF, for example, which can help bring children into the world. So ensuring that these decisions, these deeply personal decisions, are made by women within their own faith traditions in consultation with their doctors, not by politicians, is critical both to women's freedom and to religious freedom. And I want to thank all of you who have been raising your voices against the dangerous and extreme abortion bans that we now see in more than 20 states across the country. Every time I say this, I am stunned but more than 2 years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, more than 28 million women of reproductive age in the United States live in a state with an abortion ban currently in effect. And that's more than 1 in 3 women of reproductive age in this country. We've heard the gut-wrenching stories of women being turned away from emergency rooms, forced to go to court for the care they need, or made to travel hundreds of miles out of state for care that would have been available if Roe were still the law of the land. And the overturning of Roe versus Wade was just the beginning, even as Republican elected officials continue to pass extreme abortion bans in states. Congressional Republicans have proposed 4 national abortion bans. President Biden and Vice President Harris stand with the vast majority of Americans who believe that the right to choose is fundamental, and that, again, healthcare decisions should be made by a woman and her doctor, not politicians. The administration has taken meaningful executive action to protect access to reproductive health care, including abortion, contraception, and IVF. Since Dobbs, we've taken action, just to give a few examples, to help ensure that women receive the care they need in an emergency, to protect access to safe and effective FDA-approved medication abortion, to defend the right to travel for medical care, support access to reproductive health care for service members and for veterans, expand access to affordable contraception, and strengthen privacy protections for patients and doctors. And we'll continue to take whatever actions we can through executive orders. President Biden and Vice President Harris will continue to stand firm against a national abortion ban and call on Congress to pass a law restoring the protections of Roe versus Wade in federal law. As the president made clear on the day of the Dobbs decision, that's the only way to ensure women in every state have the right to make deeply personal healthcare decisions. The vast majority of Americans support women's fundamental freedom to access reproductive health care, and that's why Americans must continue to make their voices heard as we work together to make Roe versus Wade the law of the land once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen and Rabbi Kornsgold. On behalf of President Biden, I want to thank the rabbis for their thoughtful questions, and Neera Tanden, Brett McGurk, and Jen Klein for joining us today. We wish everyone a sweet new year. May you be inscribed in the book of life.